Good morning. I think you all deserve to welcome yourselves a little bit more, being the people that made it to service on the first day of Spring Forward. Way to go, everybody. Way to go. Well, good morning. Welcome to the Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm the Reverend Leslie Takahashi, and my pronouns are she and hers. And I want to welcome all of you. I suspect this particular morning we have a few more people still in coffee and PJs. So let's turn and welcome all our virtual folks as well. We're glad they're here. Hi, everybody. We're glad you're here. And those of you watching it another day as well. If you are visiting our congregation, we're so glad to have you join us. And if you're joining us online or here, and we hope that you will also join us after the service just to stay around and have a conversation. And if you're online, to fill out our virtual visitor card as well. We also hope that you will attend our next Connecting You and MDU-UC class, which is going to be held in April, in which you can sign up if you're on campus at our welcoming table and otherwise through our calendar. There is always a lot going on here, and here are a couple highlights from this week, including 2 events today. We have been honored to be invited by our neighbor congregation, First Unitarian in Oakland, to join them this afternoon in a seminar by C.B. Beale. CB will be talking about preemptive radical inclusion as a queer activist, and this will be an important presentation and workshop about widening our welcome as Unitarian Universalists, especially in light of the events of this week around our nation and the continued discrimination. How do we embody a true spirit of welcome? Come and learn with CB this afternoon. You can also participate in our Move and Meet at 3 p.m. this afternoon, which will be hosted by 2 of our members, Rana and Marjorie, who are continuing our Move and Meet tradition of the pandemic. You can see those details on our calendar as well. Reverend Rodney asked me to remind everyone that it is time to sign up for Winter Nights now. If you did your preliminary sign up, you should have a secondary message from Reverend Rodney that allows you to sign up for specific tasks. So please look for that in your email or contact him this week. And please mark your calendar for Sunday, April 3rd, when we will hold our Commitment Sunday and actually hope that many of us can gather together on that morning, both in person and virtually. So we're grateful for you to mark that day, an important day for the continued health of our congregation. To find out everything that's happening here, please go to our website at mduuc.org, where our virtual calendar is under the News tab, and you can find the links for events that are happening here as well. Please contact me or our intern minister, Michael Macias, if you are in need of a listening ear or financial assistance during these times. Asking is a gift you give our community. Welcome to this beloved community.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Chris Carter, and I'm a member of your Board of Trustees. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist Church is a welcoming faith community. We begin our services by reading our mission together. We bring to life our Unitarian Universalist values as we seek truth and work for justice, nurture compassion and courage, reach out to each other and to our larger community of faith, bridge the divisions that wound the human family, transform ourselves and our world. Welcome to our service. We are so glad to have you with us, and we hope that you are keeping safe. Please join us after the service next Sunday for our virtual Congregational Forum, where we will continue to share important information about how we are sustaining our beloved community. In order to allow as many people as possible to be present for services, we ask that you remain masked. This will allow us to do more and will allow more to attend. Also, please make sure to register your vaccinations, including your booster, to attend, and arrive 15 minutes early to allow our ministers to check your status before the worship begins. Lastly, invite you to please join Michael for our virtual connection hour after services today at 11:45. Thanks for working to keep our community safe. In these ever-challenging times, we are here for one another. And welcome. It's good to be together.
So we have the opportunity to do something that we're still getting used to and still enjoying, which is greeting one another. So if you are on our stream this morning, please perhaps post in the YouTube chat, but if you're on campus, we invite you to spring forward into greeting. We have all, so wonderful to have that greeting energy. We have all watched with horror as the events in Ukraine have unfolded over the last few weeks. Each moment it seems there's a new update about some new atrocity being committed against our global neighbors. So today, in the spirit of generosity that is at the heart of this congregation, we will be taking a special collection. This collection will be split between our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, whose efforts you will hear about in a moment, and also a local organization, Soma Ukraine, which is collecting resources for those in the area who are relocating. So we will be taking that collection, and we ask that sometime before you leave, you either put something in the plate marking it as for that collection, or you use one of our virtual QR codes to make a donation, or if you're online in the pull-down menu, there is a tab for the collection for Ukraine. So we ask that we take in this information about what is going on as we listen to these words from the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee.
Hello, friends. My name is Laura Randall, and I'm a minister on staff with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, better known as UUSC. Since our beginnings serving refugees displaced by Nazi aggression during World War II, UUSC has been called to respond to unexpected crises and provide resources to communities whose needs are urgent and access to aid is limited. Donating to UUSC's Emergency Response Fund ensures UUSC is always ready to provide relief, including our developing work to protect the rights of refugees fleeing Ukraine right now. UUSC's first step is to send emergency relief funding to groups who are working on the ground in Eastern Europe. This will happen quickly, as UUSC has existing partners in the area from our Syrian refugee work. This includes partners such as the Hungarian Helsinki Committee, who are already responding to the current crisis by providing free legal assistance, counseling, and representation so that Ukrainian asylum seekers receive temporary protection immediately. Following the relief grants, UUSC's team will develop a strategy for longer-term recovery alongside these same partners. We know that our partner organizations on the ground are best positioned to identify the needs of affected communities and respond to those pressing needs in a way that leads to equitable recovery and honors the right to self-determination. And just as we are being called to aid those impacted by the crisis in Ukraine now, our commitment to partners facing displacement and violence in other parts of the world, such as Haiti and Burma, remains just as strong as ever. We recognize that systems of violence and oppression intersect, and that what affects one affects all. We know how important it is to look to communities that are often overlooked when tragedy strikes and center the needs and experiences of those most impacted in our responses. Thank you for the trust you place in your service committee, and thank you for your support in this time of great need.
Hi, my name is Dee Simmons, and my pronouns are she, her. This reading is from a poem by Reverend Ashley Horan. Another world is possible. Another world is possible. In this time of despair, of fear, of collapse, this time that is both like every other era and yet like no other time in history. It is audacious to declare our faith and commit our work to a world that is more free, more just, more whole. But we are an audacious people, and we are in good company with many kin, and we are ready to show up.
Morning. Hi, I'm Michael Macias. I'm the intern minister here at Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist Church, and my pronouns are they and them. How many of us have had to make a decision in life? Yeah, thought so. Some of them are easier, like which dessert we want to eat, and some of them invite us to explore our values and principles and how we live them out in this world. This story is about making a decision. And I'm going to invite you, as it feels right and comfortable, to close your eyes and imagine this story with me as you hear it this morning. A man came home one night to find 4 strangers sitting outside of his home. "You must be travelers. Please come in and have something to eat," he said to them politely. "Is your wife home?" they asked. "No," he replied. "She went into town with my daughter and my son." "Then we cannot come in until they arrive," the strangers answered simply. The man was confused, but he nonetheless went inside. Evening came, and his wife and children returned from town, and he told them what happened. "Tell them we've arrived and invite them in," the wife said. The son went out and invited the 4 strangers in. "We do not go into a house together," they replied. "Why is that?" the son asked, curious. One of the strangers stood up and explained. "Because his name is Wealth," he said, pointing to one of his friends, and then the other 2, "and their names are Success and Happiness, and I am Love." Then he added, "Now go back and decide which one of us you want in your home." The boy went in and told his mom and dad, "How nice! Let's invite Success so he may bring success in our lives," the dad said. The mother disagreed. "Let's invite Wealth in." The daughter voiced her opinion. "Why not invite Happiness in?" The son stood in the middle of the house. Then he jumped in with his own suggestion. "Wouldn't it be better to invite Love?" he said quietly. "Let us listen to our son and invite Love to our home," the father said, and told his son to invite Love in. The son once again went outside. Which one of you is love? Come with me, he said kindly. Love got up and started walking towards the house. The other 3 strangers also followed behind. The boy was surprised and asked, I thought you said only one of you could come in. Love smiled and replied, if you had invited wealth, success, or happiness, the other 3 of us would have stayed out. But since you invited love in, we all go. For wherever there is love, there is also wealth, success, and happiness.
We invite you now to sing our children out to their classes. May your mind be open to new learning. May your lips bring truth into the world. May your hearts know love and your hands do the work of justice. As you go your way in peace, as you go your way in peace.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Sabota, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I have a drumming exercise that we're going to do with some of the teenagers in just a minute, but I see that they have walked outside, so I'm going to just pivot a little bit. So when Reverend Leslie asked me about speaking today, a time that happens in the Catholic tradition, it happens to be Lent, and I always think about what we can give up and what we can do without. It also happens to be a time when she planned on addressing the themes of International Women's Day and capitalism. These are all things that I really care about. So I couldn't say no. And I also didn't know how I was going to fit in everything. But I'm going to do it because it's such an important time. And so one of the things that happened for me as I was preparing, in my day job, as many of you might know, I'm the director of a Center for Women in International, and let me try that again. I'm the director of a Center for Women and Gender Equity. By the way, I'm going to turn on my timer to make sure I stay in the amount of time because I'm going off the cuff a little bit today. So it's the busiest time of the year for me in that job. And I also work at KPFA as a producer, and it's also the busiest time because I have to produce a special International Women's Day audio documentary. This year I said, you know what, I can't do it. My girls need me, I'm really busy at work, and they said, well, we put you down, so either you can do it or it won't be done. So I did it, and it was due at 10 o'clock today. So I'm gonna actually just tell you, the things that I'm covering are so illuminating to me that I'm gonna tell you about a couple of the women I learned about in this process. So I ended up being voluntold to cover a story last week, interviewing the producer of the film, 100 Years from Mississippi. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me, and you should all see it. It's coming to the Bay Area this week. It's about a woman named Mamie Lang Kirkland. She died at the age of 111. And she'd carried the trauma with her for many years of witnessing lynchings. She saw them in 1915, and she went back to confront them in Mississippi and confront that history she left behind when she was 107. Now her son, he's her baby, he's 72, and he produced this film. And so I've just been so in awe of this story. And when I talked to her, when I talked to her son about her, I asked, like, what is it that kept her going? A couple of things. She lost her husband at the age of 55, but she didn't focus on her loss. She focused on the fact that she had him with her for 30 years and 5 days and 16 hours. She didn't count what she didn't have, she counted the moments she did have. Then that's when she went to the workforce. She became an Avon lady. And she wrote all of her orders by hand until she died at 111. Now, when she did that, she sat and broke bread with people and stayed and had coffee with them for hours on end. The other thing that she did, she drank coffee every day. So I learned from this. Yeah. And she ended every night with ice cream. Yeah, so there you go. And the other person that really struck me recently is Bonnie Johnson. If you saw the movie Fruitvale Station, she is known as Grandma Bonnie. She's Oscar's grandmother. And during the film, there was a scene where somebody called and got directions on how to make fish. Now, that's the version of Oscar that she wants you to know. Now, she credits her longevity to a couple of things. First is acceptance and forgiveness, because otherwise, she says, it'll weigh you down. So if you have nothing else, have those things. And then she has this really simple formula called DEAR. Drink water, eat as healthily as possible, maybe include some ice cream, exercise, and rest. So I think that's pretty amazing. Now, she thinks she's still got another good decade and a half left. Mamie, on the other hand, she has already moved on. But her story is going to continue to live on in the stories that her son is telling. And I think that's something that I want to call on us to do. The act of sharing stories, listening to each other, engaging with each other, and being present in the moment. That's the other thing that Mamie was good about, being present, all the way up until the end. That is what makes us whole. That's what matters. And now when they transition, others will continue to carry their rhythm. On that note, I'm going to invite a couple of friends up to the front. I'm looking at my clock here. Okay, I'm going to go as quickly as possible. I have a couple of people who I voluntold, but they agreed. They're going to help carry on a rhythm circle. I've got my own daughter, Delilah, and a couple of the volunteers. And if I could get anybody else who would be willing to come forward and grab a drum, or somebody could deliver one to you. I'm going to have you all participate. I see somebody walking up, maybe. Come on over. Okay. Okay, so you all will have to see each other. And I am going to have you all help. One of the people I interviewed, Tarana Burke, the founder of Me Too, says we have to take what we have and make what we need. So what we need right now is a rhythm, and the rhythm is going to be this. I'm going to have my drummers help, but we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. I need everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody's going to keep that beat. Then I'm going to point to the drummers. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I would love to spend a whole, someday I'm going to talk to Reverend Leslie and see if we can spend a whole hour doing a drumming workshop, because it's so amazing. What you see here is you see everybody's keeping the beat, and then within it, each drummer takes the time to add in their individual rhythm. Now, when I ask people, what are you learning from this? Somebody once raised their hand and said, oh, I learned that if I screw up, I make everybody else screw up. And I said, no. What if we reframe it and we say, what if you have your circle of people to lean on, and they hold the beat? Sometimes you might speed up, and they might speed up along with you, right, to meet you where you're at. Or sometimes we need to slow down for each other, or sometimes we need to pass the baton to another person. That's what Mei Lang did, right? That's what so many people are doing, and that's what we do in our everyday life. We're there to help each other. If we've learned nothing else during the pandemic, I hope we've learned that we're interdependent, that we are nothing without each other, and we are everything together. And on that note, together, let us worship.
And on that note, I invite you to rise in body or spirit. And it's okay to clap. It's okay to... Where did those drums go? It's okay to play whatever drum you might have. Let's make this into a house of peace. Words will be on the screens. Let this be a house of peace, of nature and humanity, of sorrow and elation. Let this be a house, a haven for the healing, an open room for question and our inspiration. Let this be a house of peace.
Let this be a house of peace.
Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of freedom, guardian of dignity and worth inside us. Let this be our house, a haven for the free voice, where all our sacred differences here shall not divide us. Let this be a house of peace.
Let this be a house of peace.
Let this be a house of peace. Let all in this house seek truth, where scientists and mystics abide in reverence here. Let this be a house of our creation, where works of art and imagery consecrate the atmosphere. Let this be a house of peace.
Let this be a house of peace.
Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of prophecy, a vision for our children, be our common theme. Let this be a house of myth and lore and legend, our trove of ancient story and cradle of our tender dreams. Let this be a house of peace.
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 We've come to the part in our service where we uplift the joys of this community and collectively hold the sorrows that are too much for any of us to bear alone. Lisa Aaron and Brian Seamount are lighting a candle for Lisa's father, Philip Aaron, who passed last Friday, March 4th, after a stroke. For 91 years, Phil graced our world with his kind and generous spirit. He will be missed by family and his community, where he had a wonderful impact. Nasa Matt is lighting a candle this morning for her Oma, who was hospitalized this week with heart problems. Linda Russell is lighting a candle of both joy and sorrow this morning. Sorrow as she listens to the experience of Black medical students trying to leave Ukraine, arriving at the border, greeted by local citizens, pointing guns at them and telling them to leave. Joy that many have made it out safely and continue to work to help other medical students as well as the Ukrainian people. It is a triumph of the human spirit when we show up in our full humanity. It is not only necessary for our survival, but also for our healing. Jeff Mertens is lighting a candle this morning. We rid this beautiful earth of all the weapons of war and have a happy, joyful future with cleaner water and air. This morning, I'm asking Reverend Leslie to light a candle of joy to celebrate Claire Solstice's 21st birthday. We are lighting a candle of sorrow and thinking of our Transylvanian kin in Romania who share a mountain range with Ukraine. Mary Kelly asked that we light a candle. Joy for Mary Kelly, who is part of the many working to protect the rights of transgender people in Texas. Finally, I'm asking Reverend Leslie to light two final candles. The first representing all the joys and sorrows that remain unspoken in our collective consciousness. And the second, a gentle reminder that we are the keepers of love and justice makers in this one imperfect but important world.
Libertad. Number 34. In C. We'll all get the same tune going here. We invite you to sing together our meditation with this idea. Liberty is more than waking up unchained. It is living in harmony with our neighbors. Deciding together, working together for the freedom of all. Libertad no es despertar una mañana sin cadenas, es algo más. Libertad no es poseer las llaves de todas las puertas, es algo más. Libertad no es construirte solitario un mundo aparte, es algo más. Libertad es convivir, decidir, elegir. Libertad es amar, comprender y luchar para que todos tengan libertad.
I invite you to join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation on this day in which we hold so much in our hearts. I invite us to summon into this room all the different forms of that larger frame of being that sustain us in times of great joy and times of difficulty alike. And today we ask that for those whose life needs order, they have freedom from the chaos. We ask for food for those who go hungry this morning, water for those who have nothing to drink, heat for those who are cold, care for those who feel so alone, and courage, deep courage, for those rising up in the name of their liberty, in the name of their values. And we ask in this time of gathering, asking that together what we cannot ask alone, that those of us whose basic needs are met, who live in safety and calm, renew our commitment to our highest values, that we have generosity where we have the opportunity to give, commitment to reshaping a world towards justice and equity, even if we're not sure how that is possible, humility in the face of valor, and most of all, may we together find faith that somehow in this world we can hold the joy of a re-emerging world and the sorrows of so many divisions between us, together in tension, together through the enlargement of our hearts and our minds and our spirits. And may we never forget that that is our work together. So may it be.
Freedom, 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 oh freedom, 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 oh freedom. Oh, sometimes I feel like I'm a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like I'm a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like I'm a motherless child. A long, long way from my home, from my home. Freedom, 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 oh freedom, freedom. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone, almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Almost a long, long way, long way from my home. Yeah, 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 yeah. Clap your hands, clap your hands, clap your hands, clap your hands, clap your hands. Clap your hands, clap your hands, clap your hands, yeah. Clap your hands, 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 clap your hands. I got a telephone in my bosom, I can call him up from my heart. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got a telephone in my bosom I can call up from my heart. Yeah, yeah, yeah. When I need my brother, when I need my mother, I say my brother, I say my mother, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah. Ooh, yeah.
Good morning. I'm Ron Anand, and my pronouns are he and him. This morning for the offering, of course, we're thinking about especially Ukraine and what's going on. And I don't know about you, but part of me wants to follow everything that's going on there. And part of me really can't do that and doesn't want to at the same time. And I came across some words from Jack Kornfield, a Buddhist teacher and author, that I think might be able to help us with that. He says, many of us wrestle with our response to the sufferings of the world. With the torrent of news, it's easy to despair or become numb. The Buddhist approach to this collective suffering is to turn toward it. We understand that genuine happiness and meaning will come through tending to suffering. We overcome our own despair by helping others to overcome theirs. We might hear this and become afraid of being overwhelmed, but each of us can contribute to the sanity of the world. And in doing so, we discover the role of bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is the Sanskrit word for a being who is devoted to acting for the benefit of all that lives. The bodhisattva's path is a striking contrast with the excessive individualism of our culture. When the world is seen through the eyes of bodhisattva, there is no I and other. There is just us. We are not separate. We are independent, declared the Buddha. Nothing is separate. Unless we understand this, we are split between caring for ourselves or caring for the troubles of the world. We human beings can live with more compassion and with more care for one another. We are limited only by our imagination. May the ushers come forward to collect the offering. to dedicate the offering using the words on the screen. To the work of this community in transforming ourselves and our world, we dedicate ourselves and our offerings.
So we're going to invite you to join with us in a responsive reading. And I'm going to invite everyone on this side of the sanctuary and those at home who feel like joining me to join with me. We'll read the non-italicized parts. And
on the left side, you will join me. We are small but mighty.
These are the words of Maureen Killeron. As we are confronted by chaos, surrounded by voices of disagreement,
may we have the audacity to speak for peace.
Lured by the seduction of despair,
may we have the courage to maintain
of possibility
and peace.
A not so funny thing happened on the way to this sermon. While this is the day for springing forth, I will admit that this may be the fate of this sermon, that it will have more bouncing around than I will. Because a month ago, as we were planning these services, my thought was to center the ways that over the last years, as the world has become more and more complex and harder to hold, that we have been seduced into taking refuge into personal consumption, adding to an economy that is gradually consolidating power in fewer and fewer uber wealthy hands. I thought that would be worth paying attention to, the way that that happens and making us more attentive to what we can buy than what we can be. Sometimes it feels like the world drives us that way. I thought I would talk about how we have widened the gap between the haves and the have-nots and concentrated wealth in the hands of a very few while reducing our actual interactions with one another over these last 2 years, especially taking away our feeling that we can interact in areas that are demanding or challenging, which require us not to live together into easy answers, but to find the answers together through our shared experience. Yet in these last 2 weeks, what has been filling my heart and my mind and my spirit were the images and stories from Ukraine about people who were living one life one day and then woke up to find themselves living a totally different life. People who we hear on our radio each morning who were tech workers and nurses, teachers and scientists, people we might have chatted with in an international experience in a cafe at one time. These people are, in a flash, living without what's needed to live, and a growing number losing life itself. I think all of us have been holding the brutal and abrupt ways that lives were interrupted, that families were disassembled, that people have been killed. Not just Ukrainians, but Russians as well. And while 8 years of Russian military action around and within their nation might have made this in some sense predictable, I think we, who sat and watched for about the same time period, the rising of hate and signs of hate in our own nation, did not understand that that meant that we could elect an autocrat. We understand at a deep level how we can be surprised somehow in this way because we really don't believe that this could happen in these times to us. We understand that, and we're holding that with the people of Ukraine and the Russians too, who are rebelling and increasingly paying the price. I found in myself, and perhaps you have it too, a nagging, painful deja vu, and it was interfering with my ability to be present to the situation in Ukraine. Once I acknowledged that, though, I began diving deeper, and I will tell you, I have watched hours and hours and hours of interviews with Macias, the Russian-American journalist, author, translator, and activist who has studied Russia and specifically Vladimir Putin for many years. Gessen's research shows that Putin believes he can return to another time, the kind of blatant imperialism of not just a few decades ago, but of several centuries ago, when conquering was the game of powerful men. In an interview with the New York Times, this is Ezra Klein this week, Gessen, who uses they-them pronouns, said, Putin appears to be placing himself on a continuum of Russian history that he sees as a series of great leaders beginning with Ivan the Terrible. Ivan the Terrible was not an emperor that Russians particularly revered before Putin's reign, but the first monument to Ivan the Terrible went up 6 or 7 years ago in Russia. Gessen says, so Ivan the Terrible, Peter the Great, Joseph Stalin, and Vladimir Putin. It's a huge span. It's a series, they say, of great, brutal, expansionist dictators. In another interview with Democracy Now!, they say that Putin lives so completely within his own isolated vision that his interactions with people or even with nations are just basically transactions that serve to answer his greater ends. This move, from the relational to the transactional, is one of the many things that we've also experienced. It was one of the things I was going to talk about in that other sermon that I was going to preach. On a smaller personal scale. As someone who worked and drove and went out in the world in 2020 and 2021, almost every day, sometimes it seemed as if I'd been reborn into this bizarre world in which the only creatures that existed were me, my car, and a lot of Amazon Sprinter vans, which gradually became the larger delivery vans, which I've learned are called Utilimasters, which we now see all the time. We replaced so many of our human interactions with purchases, and while many of us spent less during the pandemic times, those purchases took up more and more space in our lives. Binge watching Netflix or PBS, the latest video games or eating or shopping, all of these were distractions from the real fears of the world. In moderation, not bad, and yet in excess, they may corrode our sense of our common purpose, or even our connections to our own individual higher values and callings. And some of us also had drinks and drugs and unhealthy relationships with food and other addictions to fill the gaps. What we began to keep at arm's length was each other and the larger world. I've talked to more than one person in the last couple months who have said that the lesson of the last half decade for them is that good will not triumph over evil, and so we might as well just consume for ourselves and have a good time. I think I still believe that parts of that other sermon are still important. Because if we look at the growth of hypercapitalism, we see that it's at the cost of our planet, but also it's at the cost of our sense of greater purpose. And that brings me to the other part of what I saw in my heart when I began to pay attention to what was happening in Ukraine. Because it's a terrible thing that's happening, but what we are also seeing is the spirit of a people who are living out to defend their highest values. They are taking up the cause of defending their nation, as many as they can. And I think that's something that we all need to think about, that we cannot just give up all of our highest aspirations and simply become the pawns of oligarchs and the uber wealthy? How has the despair of the last years poked little holes into our stores of faith and vision? How does the coverage of Ukraine, where tragedy and personal heroics are reported each day, give us a little to despair at and a lot to hope for as well? They are deeply inspiring. So last night we sprang forward. This is always one of the hardest weekends if you work on Saturday nights and Sunday mornings. This year I will tell you that I actually saw the time change. I actually was looking at my computer when it went from 2 to 3 a.m. I was up futzing with this bouncing sermon in this bouncing time. At 3:45, a BBC update came across my phone saying that 35 were believed dead in the latest attack in Ukraine, and I realized how hard it was for me to comprehend this loss of life. In this age of digital information, we can know about almost every death in this time of war, and yet it is hard for us to even hold a single death, the loss of that infinite possibility that has been lost and snuffed out. The oligarchs terrorizing Ukraine and the uber wealthy who are leading a charge against poor, Black, trans people in our nation, to name many, have a common methodology. Each takes something of great value that is not in itself evil, the desire to have comfort or a national pride, and twists it into a grotesque caricature and manifestation of excess. Perhaps Putin is trying to reestablish the 1850s, and our last president was trying to reestablish the 1950s. Though their wealth might make them feel that they have superpowers, their kryptonite is anything that recognizes the worth and dignity of people and which challenges their deplorable transactional embrace of people around them. In the face of what we lost these last years, our belief in a more triumphant view of humanity, perhaps, time so many lives, in the face of the instant losses of safety, shelter, and life itself for the people of Ukraine, how can we not keep working for a world of more equity, hearing the stories of those who long for nothing more than the routines of work and play, family and nourishment that were theirs a month ago? How can we not live each and every one of our days infused with gratitude? Quaker teacher Parker Palmer posted this week, "My heart is broken by what's happening in Ukraine, and I'm profoundly inspired by the people of that war-torn country. They are driven by a fierce love of life, their children's lives, their neighbors' lives, the life of their democracy. They make me wonder again about myself and my country. Do we love everyone's life enough to push back on evil for the sake of the common good? Or do we blink at the evil done to others as long as our personal lives are going okay?" Over these last years, many of us have found solace and comfort in good things as well. We've taken back up old hobbies, we've reconnected with old friends. And yet in this isolation, we have also perhaps sought comfort in a way of escaping from the world that we cannot afford to sustain. Almost certainly, we have disconnected from our many roles in the world and our belief that we can make a difference. And we need that back, my friends. We need to take that back. We can take the energy from meals with friends and enjoying this beautiful spring, which is springing out forward around us. This spring, which for us is not marred with shrapnel or bombs, and we can use it to make our days glad, and we can use it to support what we are passionate about: freedom, equity, and respect for the worth and dignity of people around the world. We can remember that ignoring signs of what is coming in the next election, etc., the next lawsuit, is at our own peril. We can do this through our special collection today by taking advantage of C.B. Beale, the queer activist who we are privileged to have with us this afternoon, by joining in a virtual walk to connect to people, by signing up to help our winter night family, by doing all we can. As I worked through the night last night, we can appreciate the turkey that is taking a solo across the front of the stage. As I worked through the night last night, what I began to realize was that the sermon that I needed to say was actually not that much different than the one I had planned to deliver back last month. We may not be dreaming of world domination, but in the back of our mind, we may no longer care as much about helping create justice because we know it's a longer path than we previously thought. And we may have griefs that we need to mourn together before we get re-engaged. What irreconcilable losses are we reminded of when we see the people of Ukraine trying to reach their neighbors in Russia who are drowning in a river of false news? When we watch one impossibly wealthy man impose his will on nations and break people's lives in his wake? What wreckage and carnage have we not yet been able to sift through because of the double whammy of political upheaval and pandemic? One thing I think that history will find when it looks back is that President Donald Trump was very successful, though much of his success was masked by the Trojan horse of buffoonery. He and the movement he inspired to be the leader of convinced so many of us that the things that we hold most dear are just foolish pipe dreams for those who live in the world of ideals. That embracing the fullness of our humanity and the breadth of the human family is divisive, and that our aspirations to create a common good are foolish, and that capitalism in all its forms is always good and should reign supreme. From further crippling our postal service to obliterating the charitable infrastructure of our shared aspirations, and instead inviting those lost and struggling to take up his mythical, self-made, and self-satisfied story, he accomplished a great deal, and it is ours to be the counter to that. Here are the things that I think we need to do. We need to pay attention. We need to be present to all the blessings in our lives and the simple pleasures, and show up as well, and do what we can for the world that we dream of, that we are the stewards of. We need to take care of those who are most affected, and we need to remember that there are people doing the brave and courageous thing all around us every day. One of the last stories I saw in my deep dive into tragedy in the Ukraine was in the wee hours of this morning when I read a story about a 23-year-old Russian politics graduate who said that he was going to cross the border into Ukraine from Russia because, as he said, it is my responsibility to do anything I can to help Ukrainians. News sources say that over 200,000 people have fled Russia since this conflict began. We are more than what we can buy, and even more than what we can see our way out of. Maybe all these pieces we hold in tension, all this jumping about, has one message, that what we can do is to enlarge our hearts and minds and spirits to be part of the counter to the forces that will see us all to their demise. Today is a day for springing forth. Let us spring forth to hold the joy in this life, to keep moving towards the goal of beloved world community where peace and justice, respect and care is something that all will achieve. Let us be the ones to keep those drum beats going, and let us take those words from Tarana Burke. We'll take what we have, we'll make what we need. We are the ones who can help make it so.
We invite you to rise in body or spirit. Let's join in singing this old world. words will be on your screen. They're also in the order of service. This old world is full of sorrow, full of sickness, weak and sore. If you love your neighbor truly, love will come to you the more. This old world of one family, we're all siblings, cousins too. If you cherish one another, friendship come to you. This old world can be a garden full of fragrance, full of grace. If we love our neighbors truly, we must meet them face to face. It is said now, love thy neighbor, and we know well that is true. This the sum of human labor, true for me as well for you.
We're going to extinguish our chalice with these words from W.H. Auden, his poem September 1, 1939, written at the beginning of another world conflict. All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie, the romantic lie in the brain of the sensual person in the street, and the lie of authority whose buildings grope the sky. There is no such thing as the state, and no one exists alone. Hunger allows no choice to the citizen or the police. We must love one another or die. Let us take our commitments from this place out into our lives, our commitments to enjoy the burgeoning of the spring all around us, the burgeoning of reconnection, and also our commitments to connect to those values we hold dear and of which we are the stewards for this world. Let us go in peace.